cover chapter 1, which is Introduction to Infrastructure, Disaster Management lah. So, kita tinggal disaster management kat situ. Okay, and we have that this is the learning outcome. Okay, so saya shortcutkan, I mean the acronym of the course, I make it the IDM lah. So IDM tu means for infrastructure disaster management. So we want to explain, students should be able to explain the scope and purpose of IDM. Okay, understanding that it involve preparing for, responding to, and recovering from disaster that impact critical infrastructure. Okay, so second, student must be able to recognize the various component of critical infrastructure. So third, acknowledge the vulnerabilities that critical infrastructure faces, including geographical vulnerabilities, aging infrastructures, technology threats, and also interdependencies. Okay, lastly, understand the economic consequences of failing to protect critical infrastructure. Okay, so I think last week we have discussed a bit, about infrastructure building, what is infrastructure. So there are a bit confusion, not really confusion lah. It's like a grey area kat situ in terms of the definition itself. So today, I think we're going to start with the introduction of infrastructure disaster management tu sendiri, and we will try to classify the infrastructure element, okay, so that we are more focused in this course. Alright, so which type of what we classify is as an infrastructure that we can include in this, course as a part of the disaster management. Okay. Alright, so first of all, we go through in terms of, we say that, so IDM or infrastructure disaster management is vital for ensuring resilience and sustainability of our society in the face of disaster. That's obvious. Alright, so the importance are first, you want to safeguarding our essential services. That's the first. Okay, because when we talk about infrastructure, it's always going to be essential services. Okay, second, it has to be resilient, to disaster. It doesn't mean that it will not what we call dysfunction or so on, but that at least it can be prepared for all kind of disaster, especially disaster that already we can predict it's gonna happen. All right, if the disaster that happens suddenly is something that we cannot predict lah. Okay, third, when we're talking about infrastructure, always close to what we call as a public safety. All right, because whatever infrastructure disaster, they always, because there will be occupants, in the infrastructure itself or using the infrastructure itself and so on. So it's always closely related to public safety. Fourth, economic stability. All right, so because some of the infrastructure, we can categorize it as the backbone of our country or our, in terms of city and so on. So basically, what we call, if it's not being handled, if it's not, the risk is not being calculated and so on. So of course, it will give big impact to the economy, since that, the cost for all the repairing to sustain it back is quite, it's quite high. And fifth, we have sustainability and also recovery. Okay, so whatever, we have to admit that disaster is something that we cannot avoid. It happen. But there are certain conditions whereby, especially we can kind of like predict that it's gonna happen. Especially macam contoh like banjir, we know it's gonna happen, especially in certain area, a landslide, and all. Kalau macam like, if say that we have a country that have earthquake tendency, so we kind of like can predict this kind of disaster could happen. Okay, so of course, when it happened. But I think the most important thing is in terms of sustainability and the recovery process. Alright, so that is the part when, in terms of management, it has to be what we call plan accordingly. We respond accordingly, and we know what are the action has to be taken in terms of to sustain it back, and also, the recovery process. Okay, and 6, community well-being. So when it happened, basically the most, when we're talking about infrastructure, the basic thing. So of course the most impacted what we call parties will be the community that who live nearby, who are using the infra and so on. Okay. Then we have mitigating the human suffering. So this is of course to the people, or to the people, especially people who affected directly because of this infrastructure disaster. Okay, so we have to make sure that we know what to do, what are the strategies, how we want to manage it, so that we could mitigate the suffering, right? Then of course long-term viability. Okay, so like we say, when it happened, but then of course we what we call that, life goes on, so the process, in terms of recovery, in terms of long term, we are, every incident happen, we always going to be able to learn from it. So from it, then we try to improve the process, the especially in terms of managing the disaster, or infrastructure disaster in this case. So in the long term, it always has to be improved from time to time, so that the process, recovery process, plan the risk process, and all that can be improved. Okay, so we say that IDM is indispensable for securing our society resilience. So sustainably in the face of disaster, we say. So it fortifies essential services, especially when we have support public safety, maintains economic stability. We want to facilitate sustainable recovery. Of course, we always gonna prioritize community well-being. Okay, alamak, sorry, tertutup pula kan. Right. Okay, so ultimate, in terms of human suffering, and also ensuring long-term viability of our communities. So all this, you can have all it together lah. So it kind of round up the importance of, to go through this infrastructure damage, disaster management. Okay, so in terms of what we call, what is the scope, a purpose, right? So we can say that the purpose of this is divided into 3 categories. All right, the first category is we always have a what we call lesser preparation. So we involve proactive measures. We prepare. We prepare means that we take in advance to reduce vulnerability of the infra, and enhance the resilience of critical infrastructure. So we identify that. So we already prepare for it. We in terms of management, we have to always look forward. Okay, and also always prepare all the consequences, the risks and so on. Okay, and second will be response. So it entails managing the immediate aftermath of a disaster. Okay, maknanya if it happens, how are you going to respond? Right, so focusing on saving lives, of course, that's the ultimate aim of everything. Okay, and of course minimizing the damage to infra. Like we say, it happens. All right, especially for at a place where the risk is there. The risk, we cannot avoid the risk. The risk is there, but then what we can do is we have to make sure that we able to, especially anything related to people's human life, community, and of course we can also minimize the damage. Okay, that's the least thing that we could do. All right, and of course when it happens, the most important key is recovery. All right, so when we have this IDM, it will look into these 3 main things. All right, and it will extend a long-term process of rebuilding, restoring infrastructure, and of course trying to get community back on their feet. Okay, we have to have this kind of support system. All right. Okay, boleh semua? Everyone?
Boleh.
Boleh Alright. So kita go through dulu the lecture. Nanti we can I have few slides ni, so then we can have a discussion lah. At this point, because the aim is we're gonna give you all the facts first. Okay, so with these facts, then we'll be able to relate with the case study. I hope everyone dah ada satu case study. Kita last week kita ada bincang kan about identifying case study for this week punya task. Dah ada ke everyone? Boleh ke?
By group kan Dr. kan? By group or individual?
Yeah, by group. Yes. We
okay.
decided to have only 2 groups, right?
Yeah.
Maknanya kita ada 3 orang. Alright. Kenapa pula ada balloon pula ni? Okay. Alright. So ada tiga orang lah satu group. So we gonna have case study. Okay.
Yeah.
So I hope macam mana kenapa pula ada balloon ni? Saya pun pelik. Tiba-tiba pula datang balloon ni. Okay. So then we can have so this is the points yang mana when you prepare the task, maknanya having in mind the case study that you guys have selected. Okay, so this is other points where you have to find, will guide you to find or prepare the project. Okay, so therefore kita akan look through lah. Okay, one by one the element of this topic. Okay, alright. So the significance of critical infrastructure. Yeah? Why protecting critical infrastructure is so essential? Okay, kenapa? Why? First, we say that critical infrastructure refers to those system or asset normally. Macam kita discuss last week. Okay, that are indispensable for the functioning of a society, the economy, and also public safety. So we can say that examples such as we have transportation networks, okay, energy system, communication system, water supplies, healthcare facilities. So all that where we categorize it as infrastructure. Okay, so the significant, the most significant is what we call critical infrastructure ni memang what we call it will provide essential services. Okay, macam tadi lah you mention ada electricity, clean water, transportation, healthcare, emergency response. So if say that if we fail to protect critical infrastructure, it can range from loss of life, okay, and property to massive disruption in daily life. You just imagine you don't have electricity, you don't have a clean water, the transportation network breakdown, and all that. So of course, it will disrupt our daily life, which can have a cascading effect to the entire community or even to the entire region. So it is something that, we have to really look into it. Alright, so let us go through in terms of what are the types of critical infrastructure. Okay, so when we talk about critical infrastructure, we can categorize it to several points here. I try to, so that we are clear, because our course here is mainly focusing on the infrastructure damage, what we call management. So let us classify infrastructure element dulu, yeah. So first we have what we call as transportation network. So in transportation network ni we can include like roads, okay, bridges, airport, ports, railway. Okay, so all these are very vital for the movement of people and goods to, from one place to another place, for export, importing goods and so on. So this is what we call as a transportation network. Then we have energy system. All right, so this mostly we focus, the production, distribution, maintenance of electricity, natural gas, fuel supplies, all that. So this is infra for energy system, okay, because that is essential, basic needs of our people for us to live. Then we have communication system. Nowadays, communication is part of the most important infra, because that is where all the information nowadays, the exchange, how we communicate. So it includes like telecommunication network, all the tower, internet, broadcasting system. So all that include all the infra that to have this network, especially for communication. Right, then we have water and wastewater system, so essential for public health. Okay, so this system provide access to clean drinking water, right? So and also manage wastewater. So I think this is also quite crucial, right? Then we have healthcare facilities. Okay, so this include hospitals, okay, clinics, so emergency services, critical infrastructure for public safety, especially during disaster. So I know when last week when we discussed about infrastructure, what are the difference between infrastructure and structure itself as a building and so on. So if you look into that as a definition, it's quite difficult for us to differentiate it. But if you look into the functionality of a building, for example, a hospital is a building, clinic is a building, So, but then when we know that the building, the purpose of it is a hospital, so of course it provides healthcare facilities. So then we can categorize it as well as a infra. All right, so it's a infrastructure because that is the hospital itself, not talking about the building, but we are talking about the function of the building. All right, so it's an infra which is provide a basic healthcare to the society, to the people. Okay, so that is considered as infra. Then we have emergency services. All right, so first responder, police, fire departments and so on. Okay, so fire station, and also and emergency medical services and all lah. So that one is also the key role of this disaster response. When disaster happen, so this is quite critical infra that we need to support. Okay, we need support from and then we have government facilities. Okay, government offices is a building, public administration centers is a building. So emergency operation centers, okay, all this. So if we for this course actually we are me and Dr. Faris is trying to get contact with NAMA. We hope that we can get in touch with one of the managing person in NAMA, so that at least can give us some talk lah to the course. Let's pray that we can get the right person, inshallah. Okay, we try. Okay, so that is the type. All right, I hope everyone clear. So when you want to relate with your case study later on, so you have to need to identify the type of this your case study, your case study, your infra case study that you have chosen. So it fall into which category, the type, which category of types, okay, for critical infrastructure. Okay, so from there then we can elaborate further in terms of the function, the significant to protect it, to manage the disaster and so on. Okay, and next we have what we call as the vulnerabilities of critical infrastructure. Okay, so it vulnerable, it exposed to all the risks. Okay, so vulnerabilities exist due to various factors. There are few various factors that we can consider that cause vulnerable, critical infrastructure. First, we have geographic vulnerability. All right, so which is this? Of course, we have in common. It's like a region. Like we say before this, there are some places that prone to experience disaster like earthquake, floods. Okay, hurricanes, tornado, all these natural disasters that commonly happen. There are certain places, we know that always experience this kind of issue because it really strongly related to the geographic, of the place, of the region. Okay, even but then in our case, in Malaysia, especially in the Klang Valley, or floods is something that nowadays it's not really because of the geographic region properties. Is more like influenced by all the construction, uncontrolled construction, doesn't have a proper what we call for the waterway and so on, right? So that also cause a flood, because nowadays we can see that flood happen mostly at the town, city, because of all these constructions going on. Okay, then we have age and condition. Okay, so aging infrastructure. All right, aging infrastructure may not meet a modern safety standard, making it susceptible to damage. Okay, when we go here, actually, it closely related to building infrastructure design, whereby you say we are looking at nowadays we have old infrastructure still standing, For example, we have like, dam, bridges, the age is already reached like 60 years, 50 years, 70 years. There are some dam already reached 100 years. Okay, so but then you can imagine during that time when they design our infrastructure, Malaysia never experienced all this kind of flood, landslide, very minimal. And then earthquake lagi lah kan. But nowadays there are certain area that exposed to earthquake, not because our geographic region, but then because of influenced by our neighbor Indonesia, Philippines, and so on. So it kind of like impact give our region, geographic region impact in terms of, because we can feel the vibration of it, okay, when earthquake happen. So this kind of unexpected event that happen impact or give what we call that the design of our old design of our infrastructure, because before this we never design or we never include class for earthquake probability in terms of our design. But then I think lately we or what we call the earthquake criteria have to be included in terms of our design, especially for high-rise building. Okay. Then we have technological vulnerability. So technologically now we are facing quite what we call things that we never expect can happen, which is cyber threats. Okay, cyber threats, technological failures can compromise infrastructure and so on. So this is something quite what we call quite recent things that could happen, because all our infrastructure mostly what we call equipped with all this high technology, in terms of the what we call we always have all this smart system, AI system, all are embarked in terms of our infrastructure system. So this technology do, if say that exposed to this kind of disaster, corrupted by this disaster, so of course it will make the infrastructure can ruin our infrastructure like in a way. Then we have interdependencies. So then we have interdependencies. The interconnection between various infrastructure systems can amplify the impact of a single system failure. So this is, because normally infrastructure, especially when we have a communication network, transportation network, because it always connecting from one to another. So if say you have one system fail because of probably ada earthquake ke apa, ada landslide ke apa, then you might have the network is no longer interconnected. So then of course it will be difficult for people, it will kind of like cause so much problems and so on. So this is one why the factors that cause vulnerability to the critical infrastructure. Okay, all right. Okay, then we have what we call as the economic implication. All right, so of course everything happen, especially when it involves repairing, recovering, involve money and so on. So of course it will lead straightly to the economic implication. So disruption can lead severe economic losses, impacting industries, supply chains, job market. You can imagine if natural disaster happen, no electricity, and what we call transportation network cut off and so on. So this is definitely going to implicate our economy. Rebuilding and restoring infrastructure after the disaster can be exorbitantly expensive, no doubt. Okay, so therefore, if say that there's no proper management in terms of the risk, we didn't minimize, the damage, the infrastructure damage that could happen. So of course, the cost will be much more expensive. So therefore, in terms of investment in the infrastructure design management can yield long-term economic benefit because we already foreseen the possibility. We already, guard, with to minimize the damage and so on. So of course, all this effort, all these steps that we already planned, and whenever you have a proper plan, of course, this could help in terms of to reduce the economy implication. Okay, all right. Boleh everyone? Okay, so all right. So here are some discussion. Maybe we can discuss a bit. Boleh everyone? Okay. Now we have the natural disaster. Now kita go through disaster punya apa kata classification lah. Alright. So disaster in a way kita ada two types lah. Satu natural, satu tadi macam ada our friend mention tadi, natural disaster and man-made disaster. So natural disaster is something yang natural lah, dia happen kan. So first, kalau di bawah natural disaster tu, we can categorize it sebagai meteorological disaster. So this one include kalau ada hurricanes ke, typhoon ke, maknanya kita tak ada lah kan, all these things kan. Tornadoes, ada juga yang hampir-hampir tornadoes kan, yang air pusing orang panggil, yang masa ada sekali happen tahun lepas salah saya kan. Alright, and floods, we have floods, we always have floods. Drought, so ada jugalah tapi not that critical lah kan kalau in terms of drought ni. Alright, then we have geological disaster. So geological disaster ni we can classify sebagai contoh earthquake, okay, volcanic eruption, okay, landslide is under geological disaster. Alright, so dia different category. So bila kita bercerita pasal our project nanti, we need to classify kita punya disaster tu which type, meteorological punya disaster ke or geological disaster. Ataupun bila kita sebab masa kita tengah nak evaluate our risk, what type of disaster, mungkin dua-dua boleh berlaku. Walaupun hakikatnya mungkin berlaku landslide je, tapi kalau tengok jalan tu for example, okay, kawasan tu kalau kata banjir, jalan tu mungkin akan rosak juga. Ada possibility of mungkin kawasan tu boleh banjir. I don't know. Kita kena tengok lah. Alright, the tendency of it. Climatological disaster. So we have what we call as extreme heat wave. Kalau macam, I think heat wave ni pun kita ada few ni lah kan, but then tak adalah sampai effect our infra tu secara directly. Extreme cold and winter storms, okay, this one normally for seasons punya weather. Wildfires, okay, uncontrolled fires spread rapidly, okay. Normally kalau macam kan, kalau panas sangat, then we have the burning, open air burning tu. Alright, then we have industrial accidents for technological disaster. So all this yang mana ni semua natural. Now we go to human-made disaster. Alright, so human-made disaster ni, first we can categorize dia sebagai technological disaster. So technological disaster ni kita boleh ada industrial accident, for example ada chemical spills, explosion, accident, semua ni are industrial accidents, ya. And then we have nuclear incidents, okay. Kita mungkin tak adalah sangat, but then I think nuclear incidents ni kalau we read the news, ya, happen dekat Jepun, Japan, Russia, all these countries, they are having problems, especially to release all the, radioactive materials, from the nuclear plants, right? And then we have transportation accidents, so all these are technological disaster lah. We do have transportation accidents kan this year, airplane crashes. Okay, we also ada few, I think kita pernah ada train derailment also, shipping kita tak ada lah, but then airplane yang quite recent lah yang happen. But of course dia tak adalah sampai, dia terputus sekejap lah kan our road tu, but not hari tu lalu macam tak adalah impact teruk sangat kan the road. So I think in terms of that disaster to damage tu not that crucial lah. Okay, then we have environmental disaster. Okay, so environmental disaster, human-made bukan yang natural, it caused by human. Okay, so first we have deforestation, habitat destruction, pollution, right? Semua ni caused by human. Okay, so the release of harmful substances into the environment affecting air, water, soil quality and so on. Pollution is caused by human. Okay, that one is also considered as disaster. Societal disaster. So nowadays conflict and war. Sekarang what happening in Gaza kan and Israel. I think this is the issues lah. Alright, the war, terrorisms. Okay, so all this impacted the infra lah. Okay, by targeting civilians, infrastructure, institutions. Then we have biological disaster, right? So all this COVID-19 is considered as biological disaster. So dia bukan natural made, it's a human made disaster. Alright, so it's a part of, we can categorize it as a disaster because it's a pandemic, pandemic and epidemics. Okay, so disease, so affecting a large population. So I think it's such an experience lah what we had gone through last time. Alright, so then we have also bioterrorism. Okay, so deliberate release of biological agents like pathogens, toxin, with the intent to harm or intimidate, person lah or human. Alright, macam the phosphorus bomb used by Israel too. I think this is kind of biological agent as well. Okay, alright, boleh everyone yang about disaster ni? So saya pun actually to be honest preparing the lecture note saya banyak belajar myself lah. Okay, saya pun tak sangka banyak rupanya disaster ni punya type yang can be categorized. Okay, so it's a what we call we can say lah sometimes because we always what we call being exposed to a common disaster that used to happen. Especially kalau kita kat Malaysia, happen in Malaysia lah. Alright, so ada certain disaster tu, we never thought that it could, it still be called as a disaster sebenarnya kan.